Hello everyone, and welcome to another one of our videos. Please take a deep breath, relax, and enjoy.
Students who had a relationship with a teacher, how did it start and how did it turn out? It started innocently enough. She was my course teacher, fresh out of college and only 6 years older than me. My brother was actually dating her friend from high school. I used to cut class and say I had a music lesson and we'd just hang in the music room, talk about books, music, movies. Then she started complaining about her relationship a lot, needing hugs, which I was more than happy to help with. It eventually turned to making out, and we finally started getting intimate when she gave me rides home after school. I honestly felt like I found $1 million but couldn't tell anybody about it. It was weird. Then she got weird, asking for her hugs in front of the entire class. I knew everyone knew. I started riding home with my friends again, then she started just showing up at my house. Had a very awkward convo with my dad who knew exactly what was going on but was so impressed he just kept saying, "Damn, she's pretty." Ghosting hadn't been invented back then, but I did the best I could. Eventually she chilled out. A few months later I stopped by her room during our normal hangout time, and she apologized, told me she was just going through a lot with her a-hole of a boyfriend and needed some attention from someone that actually liked her. We didn't talk much after that. I graduated soon after, but we're friends on Facebook and she actually married a decent guy and has a nice family. I'm very relieved it was never found out. It would have been devastating to both of us. I slept with one of my professors in college. At the time I was 19 or 20 and she was in her mid-30s. I went to see her during her office hours. We talked for a few minutes and when I went to leave she gave me a long hug and told me, "You give really nice hugs," as she held onto my arms. I asked for her number and went on my way. We exchanged a few flirty text messages over the next few days before she invited me over to her apartment to help her hook up a new TV she had bought. We ended up sleeping together about 10 times before she moved away to take a new job at a different school. My religious studies college professor. She was hilarious and brilliant and always brought her interests up in class and they usually aligned with mine. It started off with what felt like on-topic to class discussions, then into more friendly casual conversations about books and movies. Then it definitely transitioned into flirting, which was weird because I'm also female and had never had feelings for another girl, so I thought it could just be some weird fantasy in my head and I was just making something out of nothing. Anyways, fast forward, semester ends, I'm out of her class. I submit my final at noon. By 1 p.m., she emails me my final grade and says, "I'm all done submitting your grades, so you're officially no longer my student. Congrats on passing the class and good luck." So I sent back an email with a song attached and then the emailing went on from there before we officially hung out, which led to intercourse, which led to a 3-year relationship. We moved in together for about a year but it ultimately didn't work out cause we wanted different things long term, but we ended on good terms and I'm grateful for the relationship now 5 years out as it helped me realize what I want in a partner. I now have an amazing boyfriend and I heard she recently got married to a woman she started dating after me. When I was 17 I had a fake ID and went out to the bar with a couple older friends after a hockey game. We met a group of girls out and we hung out for most of the night. I ended up going home with one of the girls. We hooked up that night, we exchanged numbers and I left in the morning. So Monday comes around, I go to school and I walk into my first period class and the same girl I hooked up with is the supply teacher. Her face was about as red as an apple and I was strutting in my seat like Vince McMahon. I had a crush on a professor in college. Friend and I got drunk and decided to see if we could find his house because I got a hold of his address somehow. I was 21 and he was 40. Anyway, stumbling around like idiots in the dark and he comes out with a ball bat and was like a data sumo bear, "What are you doing?" And I realized the only way out was through, so I fessed up to basically everything and ended by saying, "I'm so embarrassed. You should invite us in for a glass of wine." And he did. We started hooking up from then for about 2 years, the intimacy was great, but then I moved and it didn't work long distance. He was a great cook, really supportive and kind, and always had great weed. I actually really liked him but, of course, he never wanted anything serious and we're not in contact anymore. My 8th grade teacher. This was during the 80s before all the scandals, when no one really cared if a female teacher was spending a lot of time alone with one of her students. I was 14. She was mid-40s and a family friend who had known me since I was a little kid. She asked me to volunteer for a school activity that had us spending time together after class and occasionally off campus. My mom knew her, so wasn't bothered I was spending so much time with her. She had always teased and playfully touched me as a kid. When we were alone after class, she started touching me more and flirting and talking about intimate things like her divorce and asking me if I had a girlfriend yet. She escalated the intimacy through the year, pushing boundaries a little more each time. We started getting intimate that summer. It went on for about 3 months. She ended it once I went to high school. My family moved out of state after my freshman year. I had a long talk with her before leaving and we parted on good terms. I never spoke to her again, but heard she eventually remarried and became vice principal at another school. She died a few years ago. I'm almost 50 and still think about her quite often. I had a crush on one of my grad school teachers for a year and a half. I was into everything about her. Looks, brain, everything. I ended up teaching the same subject many years later and I still use the notes and materials from her classes with my own students. She was engaged to someone else, so I never even thought about anything ever happening. It was a nice fantasy. Then out of the blue, she calls my cell phone and tells me that she's thinking of getting into yoga and knows that I am into yoga, so would I get a drink with her and tell her more? I was not exactly experienced with these things and I actually took her at her word. I went expecting to talk about yoga and go home afterwards. We ended up getting totally wasted, making out in the middle of a bar, and then I walked her home where I kept saying I'm sorry and this definitely isn't happening. And I'll just get you to your door and go home. It did happen, but the joke was on her. She got a few seconds of the worst intimate time of her life and then got to listen to me in the bathroom for a while. The next day she found me in the hallway and told me that it was a huge mistake and asked me not to tell anyone. Nobody would believe me anyway, so I agreed. I can honestly say I wish the entire thing had never happened. She got married and moved on with her life. I ended up having to take her husband's class before I could graduate. I fell in love with the workshop supervisor at my university that guides the workshop that I need for my education. She is about a year older than I am. I am doing some small arts and crafts and leatherworking. She was interested in getting something and she bought something custom. I can't remember how it started out, but for some reason or another, we had some drinks which ended in a night spent together and a physical relationship. We discovered an attraction to each other. She went to the faculty director with the situation and explained it. Since she cannot give marks on my work and is only a guide in the eyes of the university, they approved of the relationship. That was about 3 years ago. We are still together as I am finishing my education. The relationship moved on from the physical flirt which it all started with to something deep. We live together for 2 years now and she helps me sometimes with running the 2 companies that I set up aside my study. When I finish my education next year I will even propose to her. There was a super hot student teacher that was at our school, so he was only like 23 maybe. Does that count? I was 17 and it was at our graduation dinner when we had snuck a bottle of Passion Pop in, so we were pretty tipsy. I told him I always thought he was hot and before I knew it his hands were down my pants. We still had about 3 weeks to go before we left school, so spent the next week having fun around the school and nearly getting caught a bunch of times. It was pretty hot to be honest, and I still think about him from time to time. I was 18 in my first semester of undergrad. I hadn't really made any friends yet. I'm from a small town and this was a huge public university. I was taking a general course required by all students for graduation and my professor was in his 30s and he was hot and seemed flirty with me, but I really couldn't tell. He asked me out for coffee after class one day and I turned it down. At the end of the semester, he sent me a kind of long email that basically said he was into me and we should meet up for coffee, again. Didn't turn him down this time, we got coffee, then we hooked up in my dorm room. Repeated this weekly. It ended up getting a bit messy in the next few months. Turned out that he had been sleeping with another student, who found out he was sleeping with me and got really upset, and reported him to the university for sleeping with students. It also came out that he had a girlfriend of like 10 years who he lived with, and when the university investigated him for misconduct she found out that he was sleeping with students and broke up with him. He didn't get fired and I naively supported him anyways and kept up a pretty regular FWB thing, like meeting up 1 to 3 times a week for 3 years until I got into a serious relationship. I have mixed feelings looking back on it. It was hot, but it definitely was a big reason why I didn't make many friends in undergrad. I showed up at this big university from a small town where I knew everyone from birth and he was the first person who really reached out. Now that I'm a little older, It also kind of bothers me that a 36-year-old man in a position of power would be interested in pursuing me when I had been 18 for not even a full month, and I definitely looked and acted younger. I had an eating disorder that was pretty bad at the time and was 5'5" and maybe 85 to 90 pounds tops, and in a terrible mental space where I was desperate for validation, and was generally just immature, or maybe normal mature for an 18-year-old. It's also a little weird because I'd only just lost my virginity at prom night senior year of high school to my boyfriend, and we broke up weeks later, so I was really inexperienced, and it makes me a little sad that this was my first real physical partner. Not sure if this counts, but my particular field has a mandatory internship period after graduating college and passing national board exams. During your internship you have a preceptor in charge of guiding you and teaching you the things the books didn't, like physical techniques and state-specific laws. The preceptor is often a supervisor or manager at the facility that gave you an internship, but could be anyone with a license in the field. Internships are extremely competitive and extremely hard to come by in my area, so I started out doing grunt work at a facility to eventually earn an internship. My preceptor was the supervisor of the firm and more than a decade my senior. During the internship you understandably spend a lot of time together because the intern is not allowed to perform any job duties without supervision. So we had the same schedule, worked on the same projects, and ate lunch together every day. After about 4 months of this, we both come back from holiday break, and as we're catching up we both say we have big news. His news turned out to be that he filed for divorce with his wife. He'd been wanting to for a long time, but talking with me about infidelity finally gave him the push. His ex-wife had cheated on him twice and he had proof. My news was that I broke up with my long-term boyfriend. We both kind of looked at each other and blushed and went back to eating lunch in a bit of awkward silence. It took another 4 months of awkward brushing up against each other while trying to work, physical job, awkward radio songs coming on while working. Don't Stand So Close to Me by Sting and the Police came on spontaneously on the radio while we were working together on more than one occasion, and veiled flirting before we finally went on a date together. He continued being my preceptor for the remaining 4 months of my internship, and we dated in secret, since he was my immediate superior and responsible for whether I got my license in the field. Then when I got my license we both went public with the relationship, and shortly after moved to a different firm where he was immediately promoted to management and I was promoted to management within a year. 5 years later we're both still doing well with the new firm, married, own a house together, and our first baby is due in a month. Happened to me when I was in 7th grade. She was my conversations teacher. To be honest, she was my first crush, which started when I was in 4th grade. She knew my parents. So, sometimes I had to stay with her when they were late to pick me up from school. It happened 2 months before finals. She told me that she wanted to kiss me and if I was okay with this. I changed my school and she left town some years later. The dilemma is, although I remember time spent with her very fondly, I wouldn't want any other kid to be in the situation as I was in.
Congratulations, you've made it to the end. We want to thank you again for giving us a few minutes of your time, and we wish you have a great rest of your day, night, or whenever you're watching this. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to subscribe. It really does help us a lot. That's it from me. Roll the outro.